there's always that special horse, or maybe several special horses, that really touch us, that we feel a special connection with, that change something about our riding, or maybe even in a bigger way, change something about how we think about horses or even think about life. I would love to take the opportunity to tell you about 3 horses that I've had in my life that really changed the way that I train, the way that I interact with horses, and even on a bigger level have changed some of my perspectives as well. The first horse was named Scotch. He was a quarter horse gelding, and he was my first horse. He was given to me when I was 9 years old by a friend of our family. Scotch was a big quarter horse. He was 32 at the time that he was given to me. He'd been a working cattle horse his whole life, and I had him for 5 years. He died when he was 37, and he was in good health right up until that very end. Scotch and I used to spend hours just wandering around. I was riding him bareback. I didn't even own a saddle for the first, I think, few months that I owned him. And then even when I got a saddle after that, I found it uncomfortable. So most of the time I didn't even ride in it. But we would just go out and explore. I first had Scotch out in Colorado, which meant that where he was out there, where my parents' ranch was, we just had almost endless space to be able to ride. And every afternoon I would spend hours and hours riding Scotch. What I feel that really taught me early on was the enjoyment of just being with the horse, and being with the horse is a way to go and do things together and explore and enjoy that. I never once had a lesson on Scotch. I'd had some lessons before, but with Scotch and I, it was just about going out and riding and seeing where we could end up. And that has always kind of stuck with me, as I've always valued being with the horse and kind of seeing where we can end up, not always now in a way of like physically going out and exploring, but just kind of seeing what we can do together. The second horse I had that really influenced me was named Sydney. Sydney was a completely different type of personality than Scotch. Sydney was hot, he was sensitive, he was a thoroughbred, chestnut gelding, very flashy, lots of chrome, had the big white blaze and the 4 white stockings. And with Sydney, he was going to be my jumper. So my time spent with Sydney from the very beginning looked completely different than Scotch. With Sydney, we were training to go to shows. I had big aspirations for competing with him at the time. And I was also with a trainer that pushed really hard, really fast. So whenever I was in lessons with him, we would be jumping just as big and as fast around the course as we could go. What that meant, because we had skipped a lot of foundational pieces, both in my riding skill as well as in Sydney's training, is that we had a lot of accidents. There was a period of time that I would come off Sydney at least once, almost every time that I would ride him. And what that meant is that it was that snowball effect of I was getting more anxious and more nervous to ride him, and that was making him even more anxious. And at the same time, we were never taking that step back to really build the correct foundation that could have helped us improve. So while I can't say that it ever ended great between Sydney and I, well, I didn't have the knowledge at the time to go back and to correct those problems that were created for the two of us. The time spent with Sydney and my work with him really helped me understand that going slow and building that foundation of skill and that foundation of training is so important. And that once all those early steps are skipped past, it becomes so much harder to go back and to rebuild than it would have been to just go slow in the beginning. The third horse is named Raleigh. And he's one that you may have seen pictures of him before. You may have even seen him in some of the videos. He's a horse that's still here on the farm. Raleigh's story is pretty unknown until he came here a few years ago. He came in here for training, and his owner quickly realized that what it was going to take in training for Raleigh to potentially, if ever, get to a point where he would be able to fulfill the purpose she was hoping for him was going to be pretty extensive, and she ended up gifting him to me to see what I could do with him. When he first came here, Raleigh was dangerous. He could be very inward, and then he would be still and he could almost seem okay, but then he would be easily triggered and have these big explosions. And Raleigh's a big horse. We think he may be a Shire cross. So when he does jump in the air, or he does take off, or he does kick, it's a lot of movement and it's a lot of horse. Raleigh also has at some point likely had a lot of trauma in his life. His prior owner bought him at an auction, and that's about all the history that we know before he came here. He's very triggered, and especially was in the beginning, by anything related to the tack, the saddle, the bridle, and being ridden, and really highly anxious through any part of that process. What Raleigh taught me was to be accepting of where the horse is and to be accepting on each day. Raleigh is one of those horses that we may have had several weeks of great progress, and then we come in one day and it feels like we're starting from the very beginning. So learning to just be accepting of that and to meet him where he is each day and work from that point, instead of having the expectation of where he should be or what he should be able to do after a period of time, has really helped me with a lot of the other horses that I've worked through as well. Because all horses, and even all people, we all have not only bad days, but sometimes we just have bad points. And sometimes the expectations that we have for a horse are going to be ones that maybe they can never meet. And Raleigh taught me to accept that fact and to still appreciate all that he is able to provide, not only in my relationship with him, but also at our farm here. And he's a really important part of our farm. I hope you enjoyed hearing about these three horses. These are three horses that are really special to me, and three that, as I was thinking about this question of what horses most shaped my life, they were the three that really stood out. I'd love to know a horse that has stood out for you. Tell us about the horse. Tell us about maybe a moment in time or a special lesson that you learned from your time with this horse. Go ahead and leave a comment down below. I can't wait to hear your stories and about your special horses. If you're watching this anywhere besides crktrainingblog.com, that's the best place to leave your comments, and I'll see you there.